The fog rolled over the small town like a blanket of secrets, and Sophia Hardest's steps echoed softly on the cobblestone streets. She had always been a night owl, but tonight felt different, heavier. Her apron smelled faintly of herbs and old wood polish as she approached the weathered brownstone on the corner of Maple and 7th. Ever since the notice appeared at the local clinic, help a patient every night, discretion required, she had felt a strange pull. Tonight would be her first visit. Inside, the house smelled of antiseptic and roses, the peculiar combination sending shivers down her spine. She had never met the man she would care for, but whispers of his condition fragile, confined to bed, hardly speaking painted a picture that tugged at her heart. Sophia had a gift for empathy, and she had a knack for noticing small things, a crooked picture frame, the way sunlight fell unevenly, the hum of a clock slightly out of tune. "Good evening," she said softly as she entered the dimly lit room. A tall figure sat propped against pillows, shadowed beneath a quilt. A faint cough punctuated the silence. Sophia's hands itched to help, to soothe. She moved to the bedside and offered a glass of water, her voice steady but gentle. The man's eyes flickered open, barely visible in the candlelight. They were striking deep and calculating, yet tired from illness. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice raspy but layered with unexpected warmth. Sophia noticed the tremor in his hand and placed the glass within reach without touching him. The nights blurred into a rhythm. Sophia arrived every evening, quietly tending to his needs, adjusting blankets, preparing warm drinks, reading aloud from books she'd chosen carefully, poetry, old novels, and occasionally letters from his past. They never spoke much of the world outside, but over time, tiny fragments of conversation crept through the silence. One night, she noticed a letter, slightly hidden beneath a pillow, addressed to someone named Eleanor. Sophia's curiosity surged, but she kept it to herself, slipping it back gently. She began observing subtle signs, the way he winced at sudden movements, the trembling when a certain memory was triggered, and the soft sighs that accompanied his dreams. Each detail painted a picture of a man burdened by secrets and a past that refused to rest. During one particularly quiet evening, a storm rolled across the town. Lightning illuminated the room briefly, and for a fraction of a second, Sophia saw him without the shadow of fatigue masking his features. Something about that moment felt like recognition, like the first thread of connection pulling tight between them. He smiled faintly, as if aware she had noticed more than she let on. Sophia started leaving small things for him: a pressed flower, a favorite poem tucked under the pillow, a tiny charm to ward off nightmares. The first time he acknowledged one of her gestures, she felt a thrill she couldn't name. They had never spoken of feelings, yet in the delicate balance of care and observation, an unspoken bond was forming. Weeks passed. Sophia began to notice inconsistencies in his ailment. Movements were smoother than she expected. His hand reached for a dropped item before gravity had its say. His memory was sharper than any illness could allow. She chalked it up to survival instincts, though a nagging suspicion crept into her mind. One evening, as rain tapped the windows, she whispered, "I'll be back tomorrow night." He simply nodded, eyes studying her as if reading her soul. The candle between them flickered and cast long shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to dance, reflecting their growing intimacy and the mystery still unspoken. As Sophia walked home through the misty streets, She could not shake the feeling that their nightly meetings were leading somewhere pivotal, that these small, tender moments were preparing both of them for an unanticipated revelation. She was not yet aware that the man she was helping every night would one day become her husband, and that the truth of who he really was would change everything she thought she knew. By the end of the week, Sophia's intuition had sharpened. She realized she was witnessing a carefully guarded life, a life shaped by secrets, hidden strength, and waiting for the right person to truly see him. And though she didn't yet know the depth of their connection, something in her gut told her that their nightly encounters were only the beginning of a story that would unfold far beyond these candlelit rooms. The night deepened, and Sophia lingered on the doorstep for a moment longer than usual. Somewhere inside, a soft light of anticipation burned. A storm rumbled in the distance, both outside and in her heart, heralding the start of a journey neither of them could have foreseen. From which city in the world are you watching this story today? If stories like this about the unseen, the classified, and the impossible fascinate you, subscribe. There are more truths hidden between the clouds than we'll ever be cleared to see. The rain had washed the streets clean, leaving behind a cool, sharp smell of wet stone and earth. Sophia Hart's footsteps were quieter now, almost cautious, as she approached the brownstone. The street lamps flickered, casting elongated shadows that intertwined with the mist, blurring the line between reality and imagination. Something in the air told her that tonight, the rhythm of her nightly visits might shift forever. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and antiseptic, an odd but comforting combination. The man she tended, who she still knew only as the patient, was already awake, sitting propped against the pillows with a quiet dignity that seemed to defy his supposed weakness. His eyes, shadowed and weary, followed her every move as she arranged the blankets and prepared his tea. "You're early tonight," he said, his voice a low murmur, rasping slightly but controlled. There was a sharpness behind it, an awareness that made Sophia pause. She wondered how much he really understood. "I thought I'd start earlier today," she said softly, placing the cup of chamomile on the bedside table. "Just in case you need it." Her hands lingered for a moment too long, as if drawn to him by some invisible thread she didn't fully understand. The storm outside mirrored the tension inside. Thunder rolled low and deep, shaking the house with an almost sentient force, and the flickering candlelight danced on the walls, casting strange, twisting shapes. Sophia tried to focus on her work adjusting pillows, smoothing blankets, wiping the small smudge of dust from the bedside table, but her eyes kept drifting to him. Over the next hour, she noticed small anomalies that didn't fit with the narrative she'd been given. His hand moved with precision that shouldn't have been possible for someone supposedly confined by illness. He shifted without effort, catching the edge of a pillow before it slipped to the floor. A small cough escaped him, yet his gaze never wavered from the window, almost as if he'd been expecting something or someone. Sophia felt a jolt of unease. Could the rumors about his condition be exaggerated? Or worse, entirely false? She shook her head, chastising herself. It didn't matter. Her job was to care, not to question. Yet curiosity gnawed at her, a persistent shadow in the back of her mind. Her gaze fell upon a small chest at the foot of the bed, slightly ajar. Inside were scattered papers, a faded photograph, and a small notebook. Sophia hesitated, but felt compelled to peek. The photograph was of a younger man, smiling widely, arm around another figure, an image of happiness she hadn't seen reflected in his current expression. The notebook contained hastily scribbled notes, observations about people, lists of names and dates. They were meticulous, almost obsessive. The man's voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're looking again," he said softly. Yet there was no anger, only curiosity. Sophia froze, caught in the act, heart racing. I was just curious, she admitted, stepping back, hands raised slightly in surrender. He smiled faintly, the first real smile she'd seen in weeks, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he said, then coughed and turned his gaze back to the window. Sophia noted how deliberate his movements were, almost rehearsed, like he had anticipated every action, every small intrusion. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to test him subtly over the next nights. A dropped book, a slightly misplaced glass, a candle. She moved an inch closer to the bed. Each tiny disturbance was observed meticulously. And each time, he reacted with an awareness that shouldn't have been possible. On the fourth night, Sophia brought a small bouquet of daisies, placing them on the windowsill, their bright petals a stark contrast against the dark storm outside. He didn't speak, yet the way he leaned toward them, tracing a finger along a petal, spoke volumes. Her intuition screamed that there was much more to him than illness and frailty. Then a breakthrough occurred. As Sophia adjusted the quilt around his shoulders, a faint calculating smile appeared on his lips. "You notice things," he said, almost a whisper, yet loaded with meaning. "Most people don tea." "Yes," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I notice." The storm outside intensified, rattling the windows and shaking loose a single drop of rain onto the floor. Sophia realized she was no longer merely a caretaker. She was an observer of secrets, a silent witness to truth he wasn't ready to speak aloud. And yet, in the fragile intimacy of these nightly encounters, a bond had begun to form, unspoken, delicate, and fraught with anticipation. Over the following nights, Sophia noticed the inconsistencies becoming more pronounced. A candle she thought she had placed behind a vase was now perfectly aligned. A book she had stacked at a slant had been corrected. Her pulse quickened with every subtle, impossible gesture he made. The nights passed like a carefully orchestrated dance. She brought him tea, read to him, left little tokens of attention. And with each interaction, her fascination grew, mingled with something warmer, something that went beyond curiosity or duty. A tension simmered beneath the surface, a fragile intimacy built in shadows and whispers. One evening, she lingered at the doorway longer than usual, watching him read from the notebook she had glimpsed before. His fingers traced lines with precision, yet his eyes occasionally darted to the window, as if monitoring the world outside. Sophia realized that he had been hiding not just from the world, but perhaps from himself. And then, in the stillness, he spoke a single sentence that made her heart skip. "Do you ever wonder what it is like to truly see someone?" His gaze fixed on hers, penetrating, challenging. Sophia's breath caught. She nodded, unable to find words. That night, as she walked home under the silver glow of streetlights and the residual mist of rain, she felt an unfamiliar stir in her chest. Questions bubbled like a hidden spring. Who was he really? Why had he allowed her into this intimate space? And most disturbingly, what part of him was still untold, the part that might one day touch her life far beyond these nightly visits? As she reached her small apartment, Sophia knew one thing. Whatever secrets lay in that brownstone, she was no longer a mere helper. She was entwined in a story larger than herself, a story of shadows and truths waiting to be revealed. And deep down, she felt a thrill she couldn't explain, a sense that destiny, in its quiet, relentless way, was weaving their lives together, thread by thread. The storm had passed by the time she fell asleep, but inside, a storm of questions raged, and Sophia, dreamless yet restless, sensed that the next night would bring revelations, tests, and the fragile, thrilling brush of fate that would forever change the rhythm of her heart. The next night, Sophia arrived at the brownstone with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The air was crisp, the fog curling around the street lamps in thick tendrils that seemed almost alive. Each step toward the door tightened the knot in her stomach. Tonight felt different. Something had shifted, an unseen weight pressing against her chest with quiet insistence. Inside, the house was still, the usual scent of lavender mixing with the faint metallic tang of antiseptic. She paused for a heartbeat at the threshold, glancing toward the figure in the bed. His silhouette was perfectly still, shadowed by the flickering candlelight, yet there was a subtle tension in his posture, a readiness that made Sophia's pulse quicken. "You're late," he said softly, not accusing, merely noting the time. She smiled faintly, moving closer with the tray of tea. "Traffic," she murmured. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Sophia placed the cup beside him and sat in the chair near the bed, careful to make no sudden movements. For several minutes, neither spoke. The storm outside had returned, wind rattling the shutters, rain drumming against the roof in erratic patterns. "I've been thinking," he said finally, his voice measured, cautious, "about trust." Sophia tilted her head, unsure whether to respond. His eyes, shadowed yet piercing, met hers. "I think trust is fragile," he continued, "and sometimes the only way to protect it is to hide pieces of yourself." Her heart clenched at the weight behind his words. She'd always known he was hiding something, but now the realization of its magnitude pressed down on her. "And you?" she asked softly. "Do you trust anyone?" A faint smile touched his lips, fleeting and shadowed. "I didn't tea," he admitted. "Not until you." Sophia felt her breath hitch. His confession was so unexpected, so raw, that it sent a ripple of heat through her chest. Yet she forced herself to focus, to keep her attention on the small details, the subtle way he adjusted the blanket, the way he traced the rim of his cup without spilling a drop. Every motion was deliberate, precise, controlled. That night, she tested him again. A small glass of water, slightly moved from its usual position. A book she had stacked haphazardly on the nightstand, subtly askew. And then, a tiny slip of paper she had left on the floor, almost invisible. He noticed everything. By the third test, Sophia realized that his supposed illness was a facade, a careful, deliberate performance. His sharp gaze followed each adjustment, each minor disturbance, with almost preternatural accuracy. Her mind raced. If he could perceive so much, if he had been faking weakness for so long, what was he hiding, and why? Over the next hour, they spoke in soft whispers, voices mingling with the sound of the rain. She asked him about his life, his past, his fears. He answered in measured tones, revealing only fragments, careful not to disclose too much. Yet even in his guarded speech, there was a vulnerability that drew her closer, a quiet magnetism that made her lean in, subtly, when she thought he wasn't looking. "Why do you come here every night?" he asked finally, eyes tracing her movements. "You could be anywhere else, doing anything else." Sophia hesitated, fingers gripping the edge of her chair. "I don't know. Maybe because you need someone." His lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Or maybe you need me," he countered softly. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear and anticipation. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside the brownstone vanished. Only the storm, the candlelight, and the fragile connection between them remained. Then came the first tangible clue. A letter, tucked beneath the mattress, slipped by accident when he shifted. Sophia's eyes widened as she saw the carefully folded paper. It was addressed to no one, but the handwriting was unmistakable, deliberate, precise, elegant. She picked it up discreetly, heart hammering, and read the first line. "If you are reading this, then the truth is closer than you realize. Trust the one who stays." Her hands trembled. The words were both a warning and a key, a subtle acknowledgement that he had been testing her, measuring her for some purpose she could not yet comprehend. The weight of the letter pressed on her chest, a silent summons to follow, to uncover the truth. Over the next few nights, Sophia became both caretaker and sleuth. She observed him more keenly than ever, noting the rhythm of his movements, the faint marks on his hands, the way he avoided certain corners of the room, as though they held secrets. Each observation added another layer of intrigue, pulling her deeper into a web of suspense she could not escape. One evening, she left a small object on his dresser, a carved wooden bird she had found in a shop weeks ago. The next night, it was perched atop his desk, perfectly aligned with the edge, as though it had never been moved. Her pulse quickened. The realization that he had seen, had known, and had chosen to allow her small gestures to remain untouched was both thrilling and terrifying. The tension between them grew with every encounter, mingling care with curiosity, fear with attraction. Sophia found herself lingering longer, speaking softly, leaning just slightly closer than necessary, and he, in turn, responded in ways that were subtle but undeniable, a flicker of the eyes, a faint smile, a brush of fingers along the blanket. Finally, one stormy night, Sophia decided to confront the truth. She stepped closer to the bed, hands trembling slightly, and spoke the words that had been echoing in her mind for weeks. "Are you really as sick as everyone believes?" He regarded her in silence, the candlelight catching the sharp edges of his face. Then, slowly, deliberately, he removed the blanket from his lap, revealing strong, unscarred hands. His voice was calm, steady, and carried the weight of revelation. "No," he said, softly. "I've been hiding, not from the world, but from those who would harm it." Her breath caught. The storm outside seemed to pause for a heartbeat, the room shrinking to just the two of them. She felt a surge of understanding, of fear, of awe, and of something unspoken that had been building between them. "You've been pretending all this time," she whispered, heart racing. "Yes," he admitted, "because the truth is dangerous, and I needed someone who could see past the lies, someone like you." In that instant, everything shifted. The bond they had been forming, fragile, subtle, almost invisible, solidified into something undeniable. Sophia realized that she was no longer merely a caretaker. She was a confidant, a partner in a secret that could change everything. As the storm raged outside, thunder rolling like distant drums. Sophia understood that their story was entering a new chapter, one filled with peril, passion, and the slow, deliberate unraveling of a hidden life. And for the first time, she felt ready to face it, knowing that the nights ahead would bring revelations that could bind them together or tear them apart. The candle flickered, shadows dancing across the walls, and Sophia stepped closer, hand hovering over his. "Then show me," she said softly. "Show me everything." He nodded, a silent promise glimmering in his eyes. The storm continued to howl. But inside the brownstone, a different kind of tempest had begun, a storm of truth, trust, and a connection that neither of them could ignore. The next morning arrived heavy with the weight of everything unspoken. A mist clung to the city's streets, an odd early fog that made every lamppost glow like a watchful eye. Maeve barely tasted her coffee. Sleep had come in fragments again, chased away by the memory of Reuben S., bruised ribs against her palms, the storm in his eyes when he whispered her name like a final confession. She needed answers, not one more half-truth, not another apology wrapped in distance. So she dialed him. He picked up immediately. "Maeve? Meet me," she said. "No running, no disappearing. You owe me the rest." Silence long enough for her stomach to twist. "Fine," he said. "The place where we first spoke. Tonight. The alley bench. The foolish, ordinary beginning of everything." That night, the fog thickened, rolling in from the river until the lamps lit only halos around themselves. Maeve walked with her hands jammed in her coat pockets, heart pounding hard enough that it felt like her ribs might crack with every step. She didn't know what she hoped for, an explanation that mended everything, a confession that would ruin it. She only knew she needed to hear it from him, all of it. Reuben was already there when she arrived, a shadow leaning against the old bench. He looked almost like he had that first night, pale, hoodie drawn up, hands in pockets, but something in his posture had changed. There was no defensiveness now, no guarded tension. He looked resigned. Maeve, his voice was brittle. "Tell me everything," she said, stepping closer but not sitting. "No protecting me, no editing, I want the truth." He drew a slow breath and sat on the bench like he needed something solid beneath him. "It started 7 months ago," he began. "My brother S. company, Caretaker, was working on a surveillance tool, not for security, not for government contracts, for profit, private buyers, very private ones." Maeve's jaw clenched. The rumors she'd heard at work suddenly felt sharper. Reuben continued, "I found out they were planning to sell it off record, not just unethical, illegal, dangerous. And when I tried to stop them, they made sure I couldn't talk. Publicly, they said I resigned. Privately, they made sure I disappeared." "Disappeared how?" "With force," he said quietly. "Threats, surveillance, a few staged accidents. I knew I couldn't go home, couldn't contact anyone who could be traced. I hid in cheap rooms, back alleys. And whenever I tried to gather proof, someone always found me." His fingers trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of the memory of being hunted. "So why come here?" Maeve asked, softer now. "Because the alley cameras were dead," he said. "I checked. A blind spot. The only place in the entire grid where they couldn't track me. And that night," he added, "I didn't expect anyone to be here. But then you walked in. And you helped me." Maeve swallowed. "You thought I was safe?" "I thought you were a mistake," he said. "Someone who saw too much." Then I realized. I kept coming back because it was the only place where I felt like a human again. The fog swirled around them like a curtain. "And the hacking?" she pressed. "The papers you stole back from that man?" "That was proof," he said. "The last set of files linking my brothers to the sale. They hired people to track it down. That man following me wasn't a random, he was paid." Her heartbeat faltered. "Why didn't you tell me from the beginning?" He looked up at her, then eyes dark with guilt. "Because everyone I ever told ended up hurt, or threatened, or worse. And you, I couldn't stand the thought of that happening to you." Maeve sank onto the bench beside him. Close, but not touching. "What happens now?" she asked. "You can run forever." He exhaled shakily. "I am meeting an investigative team tomorrow. People who can publish the files safely. If I hand everything over and testify, my brothers go down. Harrowtech burns. And I stop running." "And you?" Maeve murmured, afraid to ask. Reuben didn't answer immediately. "After tomorrow," he said, "I'll either be free or I'll be gone for a long time. The kind of testimony that saves people doesn't it leave the witness untouched." Maeve felt the street tilt under her feet. "So this is goodbye," she whispered. "It doesn't have to be," he said, "but I didn't want to drag you into this choice." She stared at him, really stared at the exhaustion carved into his cheekbones, the bruises fading but still map-like, the hope flickering stubbornly beneath everything. "Reuben," she said quietly, "you don't get to decide what I can or can't handle." He blinked, surprised. "You walked into my life broken," she continued, "and I helped you because you needed help. But somewhere along the way, I stopped doing it out of obligation." Her voice wavered but held. "I don't want to walk away. Not from you." The fog thickened like a breath. He lifted a hand, slow, hesitant, and she let him brush her cheek. "Then stay for one more night," he murmured. "Tomorrow decides everything." "Tomorrow," she repeated. The next morning was mercilessly clear, an abrupt shift from the fog, as if the city had decided to witness what would unfold. Maeve stood with Reuben outside the journalist's safe house, a converted townhouse with thick metal doors and unmarked surveillance. "This is it," he said. "Once I step inside, there is no turning back." She nodded, fingers tightening around his. But before he reached the door, a black car turned the corner too sharply. Maeve stiffened. Reuben's breath caught. The window rolled down. A familiar face glared out, the older Harrow brother, eyes cold as cut glass. "Get in the car, Reuben," he said, "before you ruin this family for good." Everything slowed. Reuben stepped in front of Maeve instinctively. "You don't control me anymore," Reuben said, voice steady. The brother's jaw ticked. "Last chance." "No," Reuben said. The man gave a small nod. The car doors opened simultaneously. Maeve grabbed Reuben's arm. "Run." But Reuben didn't move. "If I run, you become leverage," he whispered. Her pulse hammered. The men approached, and then the journalist's door burst open, several agents rushing out, badges raised, shouting orders. The brothers' men froze. Someone cursed. Someone bolted. Within seconds, officers swarmed the street, pinning the threat exactly where it stood. Reuben exhaled a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. "You set them up," Maeve whispered. He shook his head. "They set themselves up. The journalist told me if they were following me, this would flush them out." When the officers moved the brothers toward their cars, Reuben didn't look away. Not out of vengeance, out of closure. He turned to Maeve. "It's over," he said, voice cracking. "Really over." She reached for him, not hesitantly this time, and pulled him into a fierce, trembling embrace. "Then now," she murmured into his shoulder, We get to start the part where you're not running and I am not guessing. For the first time since she'd met him, Reuben let out a laugh that wasn't tired or broken. Yeah, he whispered. Our part, the morning light spread across them, warm and unashamed like a future finally allowed to exist.